Usos brand family. We are family.
Think you could tell us what to do? You think you could tell us what to wear? You think that you're better? Well, you better get ready. Bow to the masters. Break it down!
Coming up next on Generating Heat, we continue our faction series, Volume 2, with D-Generation X. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and strap in, get ready for a throwback to time in the late 90s, early 2000s for D-Generation X, Volume 2 of our faction series right here on Generating Heat with myself, JG, and Mikey Messier. So let's do it right now.
You know who you're talking to?
Everybody, welcome once again to Generating Heat. Mikey Messier, what's up, man? You like a knight in shining armor here at the last second for me.
Well, you mentioned two initials, and if I'm on the same page, man, tell everyone what we're going to be talking about. Two initials always ring true to me.
Yeah, man, this is going to be Volume 2 of our faction series that we started last week. The first series was the NWO. So you can go back in the archives on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, the Anchor app, which is what we're recording on right now. And you can check out our NWO Volume 1 on our faction series. This is episode 2 of our faction series here on Generating Heat with D-Generation X. Now, Mikey, D-Generation X was a very integral part in shaping today's wrestling, wouldn't you say?
Oh, without a doubt. And, you know, both of those groups, NWO and DX, you can say from the behind-the-scenes group that we all know as the Clique, which was Shawn Michaels, Bull H, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, X-Pac. And depending on who you ask, Just Incredible was kind of the sixth member of that, depending on who you ask. If you ask Scott Hall, he is on record of giving Just Incredible some Click love on a DVD, a WWE special. But if you ask Kevin Nash on a U shoot, he doesn't think that Just Incredible was a Click member. So it really depends on who you ask. Yeah.
Now, back in the Click days, you know, 94, 95, 96, they had a lot of pull in WWE. And then in 96, Hall and Nash gave their notice that they were leaving, which obviously led to the May 19th, 1996 incident in Madison Square Garden, affectionately known to us now as the Curtain Call. Whenever the four of them, it was all of them but X-Pac. X-Pac wasn't I'm not sure if he was hurt at that time or what, but I'm sure if he was in the building, he would have been right there with them. But
yeah, good point that he wasn't there for that. So that is a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. After that, Triple H got punished, which caused him to lose his King of the Ring push for that year. That Stone Cold Steve Austin ended up taking that spot. And Triple H got buried for a good year or so while Shawn Michaels was a champion. They couldn't really punish him. Hall and Nash were gone, so you couldn't really do anything to him. It was rumored that Vince thought about at the time docking their WrestleMania pay for that incident, but of course we all know that never happened. So then finally, after being buried for a year, Shawn and Triple H went up to McMahon and like, look, you just put us on a team, put us on camera together. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what kind of magic we can make. So finally on August the 18th, 1997, they teamed up to face Mankind and The Undertaker with Chyna in Triple H's corner, Ravishing Recruit, and Shawn Michaels' corner. And Michaels gets collar on the Undertaker with a chair shot to the head, and then all four of them left together. So that was kind of the first, our first little glimpse of what later would be named D-Generation X. Do you remember when all this went down?
I believe it or not, I do. I remember actually where I was. That's like, it seems like it was 2 months ago, not 21 years ago. I remember being in my friend's home in this apartment in Virginia, in the Reston, Herndon area of Virginia, watching this match. And it was the summertime, so I was with my buddy, and my friend was a guy that was a WWF and WCW fan, but not an ECW fan. Just for perspective, he was one of those type of guys.
Uh-huh.
But he loved Raw, and we were watching it. It was the summertime. We're in the apartment, but there's still some sunlight out, even at that hour, I believe. And just watching them assemble that show and putting those two guys together. And the big trick of that, what you just said, was I believe Shawn was technically still a baby face. Like, he was kind of a tweener at that time and becoming a heel, but he was still technically a baby face. Hunter was a heel. Mankind and The Undertaker, I think, had a lot of issues with each other. And Mankind, I think, was technically a heel. Undertaker was a baby face. And they were doing one of those things where let's put a good guy and a bad guy together versus a bad guy and a good guy. That was the mentality of it. I want to say that even Gorilla Monsoon was the one that made that match or something like that. And I remember when there was instant magic in my book when they put Hunter and Shawn together, and not to go Brian Alvarez on anybody, but when they had that long flowing blonde hair, not like I'm talking about Johnny Gargano's abs or something like Alvarez, but when they put them together, you did kind of like, oh man, these guys look like they should be a tag team. These guys look like they'd be out partying together. And at the time, I don't think I knew anything about the Clique, or maybe I did, but it looked like a perfect pairing of two guys that, Shawn was probably 5 or 6 years older, but they did have like a cool look together. You know what I mean? So it was kind of an instant chemistry as far as a tag team.
Yeah. So we fast forward a little bit, each week they're getting a little more, they're on screen doing their little promos in the ring. With some of that stuff was just crazy to me, like the strip poker game and mooning everybody. I wasn't a big fan of that part of it. But then you move ahead to where we're starting to gear up for the Survivor Series 97.
Right.
So the October 6th episode of Raw had Triple H versus Bret Hart in Canada. I believe this was in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not exactly sure. I believe that's where it was. But it was definitely in Canada. Yeah, Triple H and Bret Hart. Triple H ends up beating Bret. But during the match, the Canadian flag was hanging from the ring post, and Shawn Michaels uses it for a handkerchief and puts it up his nose. And at that time, it got some major, major heat in Canada. But it babyfaced him in America, which is kind of like going along with the storyline of the Hart Foundation, where they were babyfaces in Canada but heels everywhere else.
That was a brilliant summer of WWF, although I believe they were, during that 83 weeks, so to speak, of losing in the ratings. That summer of 97 creatively was a high point.
Yes, it was.
Oh my God. Calgary Stampede. And bro, so much fun watching that Calgary Stampede feud. And I'll be honest, when you said October 6th, is that the date that you said?
Yeah, October the 6th.
Was that the day after Pillman died? It had to be.
I'm not sure when Pillman died. Were they in Canada when Pillman died?
They did the Hell in the Cell. The Pillman died, and then 4 hours later was the first ever Hell in a Cell match with see, no one mentions that, but I always do. Brian Pillman, either he died the night before the pay-per-view and they discovered him the day of the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So basically it says October 5th, 1997 is when Brian Pillman passed away. So if that Raw was the next night, then, I mean, because to me, these are the emotional trigger points that I remember. Pillman just died, and the Hart Foundation is literally down a man because, you know, he died. And now they got this thing with DX, and look, maybe I read too much into it, but the stuff with Brett and Sean getting real heated with each other, I'm not to say that, you know, Pillman's death had anything to do with it one way or another, but you can see with a guy like Bret Hart getting frustrated, and now they're trying to jerk him around with this money thing. And obviously we're talking about DX here, but not the Montreal Screwjob, which was coming up November of 97. But
right.
All these emotional, historical things, the first ever Hell in the Cell, I mean, all this stuff is going on in a very, very short period of time.
Yeah, and you got let's see that yeah, you're right. It was October the 5th was that Hell in a Cell, and then this period of time, like this whole year, in my opinion, I know we're talking about DX, but I just got to point this out that this was the best work of Bret Hart's career, in my opinion. This whole year of 1997, where they started the whole Hart Foundation faction thing and brought Neidhart back, and it was absolutely amazing to me. The next week on Raw was October the 13th. The Hart Foundation was in the ring with Vince getting ready to cut a promo, and then it came over the Titantron with D-Generation X. This is the first time, you know, Bret had kind of put it in our ears that that's what they were going to be called. He accentuates the word degenerate several times throughout October, and then finally on October 13th, whenever the Titantron comes up, that's when they're sitting in the classroom and they look at each other and say, "We're D-Generation X, right? Yeah, D-Generation X. You make the rules, we will break them." So that is where officially the name D-Generation X began. And like I said, that was. Go ahead.
Oh, I just going to say, this thing was over from the beginning with me, man. I mean, I don't think it was a thing where, you know, the name clicked, so to speak. The guys, even Chyna and Rick Rude. I mean, if anyone, I mean, I loved Rick Rude, but to me, Rick Rude was always the guy that stood best when he was alone. So if anyone really didn't fit with that original setup, it was probably Rude. And of course, after the Montreal Screwjob, he was gone. But even with Rude and Chyna, man, and there was something about Chyna too. People kind of forget on Chyna now because of the way things broke down. But the fact that they had the female enforcer as part of this group she was quiet. I mean, the women we were used to, like a Miss Hyatt or a Sunshine from World Class even, they were usually pretty and like a Missy Hyatt was always talking. But with Chyna, she didn't talk. She didn't have to. You know what I mean?
No, she was just the enforcer. That, leads us into Montreal. And we can't talk about DX without getting into this a little bit because, as we all know, Bret was leaving, didn't want to give up the title. So it was actually, Triple H is the one that kind of said, well, if he's not going to do business, then fuck it, we'll do business for him.
Yeah, and that story's been told so many times. It's a great story. The Montreal Screwjob, I mean, I remember watching that twice in one night at two different sets of friends' house, just because even at the time we knew something was wrong or something was mind-blowing or what have they done? And it's ironic, just to give him a shout-out, the same buddy of mine who I watched DX for from Virginia had come up to Rhode Island, and we were in Rhode Island driving around to different people's homes to watch this pay-per-view. We watched the original I guess it was a 7 o'clock showing and then the 10 o'clock showing. So I remember watching that thing twice because everybody was talking about it. And one thing I would say, just I know what you said, which was kind of Bret didn't want to give up the belt. But one thing I always go to in that is, didn't Bret Hart sign a contract? And if the contract was for, I guess it was supposed to be $1 million a year for 20 years, is what's been said. How come when Vince McMahon signs a contract with a wrestler, Vince can just get out of that contract? Isn't a contract a contract? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, WWE, Vince has always been screwy about that. You know, it's like the NFL. Their contracts are written on toilet paper. You know, I mean, they can get out of it on the business side anytime they want to, but a player can't break it. Or in this case, a wrestler can't break it. It's really screwy like that. It all falls under that independent contractor law that really should not be around in wrestling anymore, but for some reason still is today. I just don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Just real quick on current events, if anything comes out of this, $1 billion deal for Fox and WWE, maybe some wrestlers, maybe some lawyers, maybe someone with the wrestler's interest at heart will kind of step up and say, okay, now you have absolutely no excuse not to unionize your wrestlers.
Yeah.
But that's a 2018. Let's get back into 97, man.
Back in 97, man. After Montreal, we started getting a little bit of the Mr. McMahon character coming out. Some more DX shenanigans going on in promos in the ring, which turned into USA Network sending a letter to the WWE stating that, these are the do's and don'ts or whatever. And Triple H and Shawn get up on a podium and read this letter verbatim. And it was some of the most entertaining stuff I've ever seen in my life. When they're saying what they can say, and then they say they will never say, cock, bitch, slut, whore, blah, blah, blah. That stuff was just absolutely hilarious to me.
Well, it was hilarious. And Triple, and they were also, in my opinion, kind of mocking Bill Clinton with the President Clinton with his I did not have sex.
I did not have sex with, it was all kind of rolled into one right there.
Yeah, and it was just very of the moment. It was very timely, and it's funny that, it's funny, but it's true that Triple H dropped the dreaded F-bomb at the time. And I don't mean, I don't mean the duck rhymes worth word. I mean the homosexual derogatory statement. I think in that thing that you just described, Triple H throws that out there. So that's not me condemning Triple H or saying positive or negative about that. It's just saying times change, sensibilities change. So what was acceptable, if it was it was edgy, but it was acceptable then to say that. Now you get killed. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. There's no possible way that they could get by doing that. Hey, check this out. Last night we were talking about the fruit segment with Stephanie and Braun and Finn Balor. Guess who right around the same time we was recording, Vince Russo and Jeff and Ben Hameen and Stevie Richards were explaining the exact same innuendo that me and you were explaining on this podcast.
Well, credit to you on that one. Credit to you on that one, JG, because I just thought it was a waste of a good apple. Credit to you on that one, man. Because it's true. You guys caught it. I totally. Sometimes, the funny thing is, it's like watching a good movie or even a bad movie. You'll see something if you watch it, and somebody else won't see it, or they'll see something that you won't see. You know what I mean? Now,
98, the Royal Rumble comes up. There's a casket match with, I believe it was a casket match, right? Yeah. With,
oh man, I got to jump in real quick, bro.
Yeah.
Did you forget that DX had their own pay-per-view in December of 97?
They did. They did. I
just had to throw that in there, not to stop you, but I just remember watching that. And the funny thing is, man, I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can remember where I was for this pay-per-view. I was at an independent wrestler's house, like his apartment or whatever. He invited me over, and the pay-per-view was not too far from me. I want to say it was in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it was called like In Your House DX or something.
Yeah, In Your House D-Generation X. Yep, exactly right.
Didn't Sean defend the title against Shamrock?
That was it Shamrock for that one?
Owen came out. Owen came out and made
yeah. It was.
So let's put it this way. DX, before the NWO, if I have my times right, and maybe I do, maybe I don't, but DX in December of 97 had their own In Your House pay-per-view. And unless the NWO Sold Out was before that, that was the first time a group had their own pay-per-view. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going to look up NWO Sold Out because I'm curious.
I mean, unless you count, Sold Out came first, I do believe, because Sold Out came in January 97. But if you count, but in WWE, if you count the Canadian Stampede, or I don't know if you consider that the Hart Foundation pay-per-view or what. That's what it turned into.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would probably say that the name of the pay-per-view, Calgary Stampede, was more so in honor of that traditional festival or carnival-like festival for Calgary. But yes, it was totally based on that main event where all the heels were baby faces in Canada.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's just a cool thing. I think you're right. NWO does have them beat by 11 months. January 25th, 97 was NWO Sold Out. I'm going to look up real quick the DX pay-per-view, and I think Hunter wrestled Sergeant Slaughter, if you remember that.
Yeah, a boot camp match.
Yeah, man. So I don't know. I just remember what I remember the non-DX highlight, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1997. Ironically enough, December 7th, 2018, I'll be hosting my third Avalonia Film Festival. So, but yeah, Pearl Harbor Day, Mass Mutual Center, Springfield, Mass. And Shawn Michaels is on the poster of that. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and just one of those things where, you know, Vince clearly was enamored with these guys, especially Shawn. You know what I mean? And it was Taka Michinoku won the junior heavyweight title on that show. The tournament, he beat Brian Christopher. The Bariquas were there in a 6-man over the DOA. Butterbean beat Mark Marrow by DQ. The New Age Outlaws defeated LOD by DQ. Triple H beat Slaughter at a boot camp. Jeff Jarrett beat The Undertaker by disqualification. I don't remember that. And says Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated The Rock, and I don't really remember that. But here Ken Shamrock defeated Shawn Michaels by DQ. So you've got a show with 4 disqualifications, which is about 3 too many for one show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's one of those get us to the Royal Rumble type shows. Is pretty much what that was, and you know.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Now, yeah, and we're back here. I got cut off there for a second, but yeah, we was getting into the Royal Rumble 1998. It was a casket match, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. This is the match where Michaels hurt his back and really messed himself up. Now, he went over in this match with the Undertaker. Ended up Kane and Vader and a couple others came out, I do believe, and made sure of that. But he didn't really work. He worked the next pay-per-view, which was the Hell in a Cell, where Kane came out. It was Vader at the Royal Rumble because Kane came out at the Hell in a Cell, It ripped the door off, and that's where Kane was born.
Right. Well, we got. Let's just to get the timeline correct. October 5th, the same day that Pillman died, was the first Hell in a Cell between Shawn and Undertaker.
Right.
And it was sort of a thing where Undertaker was the baby face and Shawn was kind of a tweener. Shawn had accidentally cost Taker the title against Bret Hart that year at SummerSlam.
Yeah.
So Kane debuted. I always remember this, that Pillman died and the Hell in a Cell, first ever Hell in a Cell, and Kane debuted all in the same night. Then, if what you're saying is correct, which I believe it is, the next night, October 6th, if that's when they use that term DX for the first time, within 24 hours, you've got Pillman dying, Hell in a Cell, first ever, Kane debuts, and DX being named, all within 24 hours. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then moving forth the next month was the Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series 97. December 7th, really just like two and a half weeks later, or 2 weeks later, it's that Shawn vs. Shamrock DX pay-per-view. And then it's, as you were saying, the Royal Rumble 98. I believe it was Vader versus Kane on the undercard, and it was Shawn and Undertaker in the main event. And Shawn's back got injured. And, of course, Stone Cold won that Rumble, and Tyson came out and said Cold Stone. So, yeah. I mean, we're talking like historical stuff just loaded into 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it was – man, it was a great time to be a wrestling fan right here because this is a time that WCW was at its hottest and WWE was at its hottest. And right. ECW was pretty damn hot at this time, too. So you had 3 promotions that were hitting on all cylinders all at the same time. And it was it was awesome, man. Because then you roll into WrestleMania. You know, you had Hunter. Hunter went up against was it Rock? No, it was help me out. Who did Hunter go against this WrestleMania?
WrestleMania 14, Hunter got 13. The European.
He had the European belt. Was it D'Lo?
No, it was Owen.
Owen. Okay.
Yeah, WrestleMania 14 because he got that European title kind of with their own version of the finger poke of doom because, you know, Sergeant Slaughter on like a Christmas episode of Raw made Shawn and Hunter wrestle each other the next week for Shawn's European title, which he wasn't defending because Shawn still had the world title. They came out, they had like one of those really small crowds, and basically Shawn just lied down and let Hunter pin him, and he took the European title. He gave it to Hunter, and then Owen wanted it for whatever reason, and so they ended up doing, because I want to say that Shawn and Owen had a title match somewhere. Maybe they didn't, but I mean, maybe that did Shawn ever get a one-on-one title defense against Owen?
Not a program. He might have got a defense on a Raw or something. I know that they was working towards a program, and then I'm not sure what happened. It was wrapped all around the screw job, though. I think that Vince didn't want to go ahead with the plan of him and Owen after all that because Owen was talking to WCW, so he didn't want to kind of put himself in the same situation again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's just interesting that Owen did that run-in at, it says Shawn Michaels versus Owen Hart, Raw, 1997. I just found it on whatculture.com. They have an article about this match, and the final Raw of 1997 was Owen's shot at Michaels, and so that was it. And so he never got that pay-per-view, unless I'm totally forgetting something. But Owen ended up in the consolation feud with Triple H and the European title at WrestleMania 14, and that's when at that show, No Way Out, I guess in '98 in February is when Sean dropped out of the 8-man tag, and they said all morning on the morning shows, "Hey, we're going to get a replacement for Sean. Who's it going to be? Who will be the mystery partner?" And then it turned out to be Savio Vega, man.
Yeah, Savio. Yeah.
And no offense to Savio, I mean, he's a consummate professional, but I mean, it did feel something like, man, if they had thrown Sid in there or just something like anything besides Savio, basically.
Yeah.
No offense to Savio.
Well, I mean, Savio was in the Barriquas at that time, so it really didn't make any sense for him to be in that match, you know?
It didn't make any sense. And the other thing was, it's just like you've just elevated a mid-card guy to the main event, and it wouldn't have been so bad, but they used the mystery of who's it going to be as a selling point almost for this pay-per-view. Yeah. And it's like, okay, if it's going to be a who's it going to be game, then give us somebody good. And I just remember the guys that I was watching this thing with in Coventry, Rhode Island, these backyard wrestlers who had me over for some pay-per-views like this, everybody's face just sunk to the ground when it turned out to be Savio. No offense to him.
Well, this is the rumor about that. Now, I'm not sure, this hasn't been verified by anybody relevant anyways. But the rumor was that there was Waltman, X-Pac, was already out of his WCW contract by this time. The rumor was it was supposed to be him, but because of the neck injury, the WWE doctors hadn't cleared him yet. So that's why they had to kind of go with the plan B. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of the rumor that I've heard, coming along the years.
I wonder that would make sense, and that would have been really interesting. I guess I would say, why didn't they put Chyna in the match? She was there, and I don't think she wrestled a women's match or anything, and Chyna was part of that fun, and maybe they just wanted to keep it total babyface for Stone Cold's side because he was so over, man.
Yeah, he was. God, he was. Even during Hogan in the '80s, he was not as over as Stone Cold was at this time. Well,
he definitely changed the business, man, and credit to him for that.
Yeah. Now, of course, WrestleMania came and gone. Shawn dropped the belt to Stone Cold, and he kind of rode off into the sunset. So the next night, the night after WrestleMania, this is like the first Raw after Mania that really became like the Raw after Manias, with the debuts and storylines changing on a whim.
Right.
So, Hunter comes out and he told, he had to kind of bury Shawn a little bit. So he dropped the ball. He had to put himself over as the new leader of DX. And what does he do? He calls on his boy X-Pac to join him in D-Generation X. And X-Pac came out, cut a massive, it was really an awful promo if you look at it, but it drew a massive babyface reaction the way that he buried Hogan and Bischoff, which was always pretty much a no-no in WWE time to even acknowledge the competition. But it really drove home, and you could tell there was a lot of shoot in that promo that he cut, even though he's not the best talker in the world.
Well, he's not, but you know what? He was always the workhorse of DX once he got into DX. He was the workhorse of the NWO. I mean, X-Pac was kind of, and I mean this is a compliment to both of them, he was kind of the Buddy Jack Roberts of both of those groups, as far as the Freebirds, because Sean Waltman, X-Pac, Six. I mean, they had so many names for the guy, but he was a guy who was like 220, 225, and he could just bounce around. And so I liked, I'll be honest with you, what's really interesting, JG, is that just to give the full thing here, basically this DX, you could say August or October, wherever you want to proclaim that they first started, But by the time of the day after WrestleMania, 1998, which is only 6 months later, Shawn's effectively retired. So the same guy that just started this DX thing with Hunter, and it really was a showcase for Shawn initially. It was like Shawn's version of the Four Horsemen, except it was just a lot smaller group. But like the pinnacle guy, the showcase guy, the showstopper, Shawn Michaels, the day after WrestleMania, he's out, and Hunter, from a creative standpoint, has to rebuild this thing. He puts himself front and center. Good move for him. And then he gets X-Pac, which was a good move. And then he kind of drafts the New Age Outlaws, because they had, I think where you're headed next is with that whole thing with Terry Funk and Cactus Jack or I mean, so it was really a thing where, can you imagine, like right now in the background, I got the Celtics Cleveland Cavaliers game. If LeBron James suddenly, no, and I'm not saying I wish this would happen, but if he broke his leg or something bad happened, or he injured a thumb or something, and then somebody from the stands, like they magically drafted, some other player from a European basketball league, or even some other team, somehow a guy came off the stands and played the second half of this basketball game. I mean, obviously it's pro wrestling, so it's a different story, but the point is to go from that Shawn Michaels DX to the Triple H, DX, where you had four guys. You had the Road Dogg, you had the Badass, you had, China, you had Triple H, you had X-Pac, and they were baby faces. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was. Especially the way that they did it, and by the end of the night, they had that cage match, and we all know what happened there. They ended up handcuffing, they handcuffed Foley, and they kind of tied Terry Funk up by his neck, and just absolutely demolished him. Ended up new DX is born. The crowd is going absolutely nuts over it. So
right.
They had to put, I don't know if the initial thing with Vince was to push him as babyface or heel, but they was definitely babyface going into this. So they kind of ride this wave, and then the infamous night of April the 27th, 1998, right here, about 45 minutes away from me at this point in time, you had the invasion of WCW.
Wow! And I thought you were going to say the mock of the Rock and everybody in the nation.
Yeah, next, actually, this happened first.
This happened for okay.
Yeah, this happened first, and the nation parody happened the next week. So, yeah, right here they go in to WCW in Norfolk. It was in Hampton. And I'm telling you, you never seen nothing like this before, ever. And I remember watching this like, oh my God, they're actually going to get into the building. And this is going to create, they're going to end up fighting. I thought that they was going to end up right inside the building, and on Monday Nitro, there was going to be a big fight between DX and whoever. It wasn't going to be the NWO, because the NWO was all their boys. Right. But all the CW guys like Luger and Arn Anderson and all them guys, there was going to be something. There was going to be something between those if it ever got to that. But ended up they shut the doors and wouldn't let them in.
Well, the funny thing is, JG, and Bischoff has said it a million times, that in retrospect, he would have let them in. In retrospect, Bischoff was like, if I knew the ratings that WCW, on TNT, Nitro could have gotten if they had welcomed them in. What if they had done that? What if they said, yeah, okay, come right to the ring. We'll give you the microphone. Say whatever you want. Or yeah, come out, have a match. I mean, in reality, WCW missed an opportunity to take advantage of that aggression and turn it around on them. And if they open the door, and Bischoff has said this himself, this is nothing I'm thinking of, but if they had let them in, put the camera on him, bring him into the ring. And honestly, I thought one step further, which is in hypothetical, fantasy wrestling world, if that had happened and DX had invaded Nitro and gotten into the ring, if they had a super card at the time between those two groups, even if they did a thing where half this show is WWF matches, half the show is WCW matches, if they had done anything together, the amount of bank that everybody would have gotten would have been through the roof.
Oh, yeah. And what's also kind of intriguing to me is during, shoot interviews throughout the years, Road Dogg has came out and been like, he's been asked many times, what would have been the plan if y'all got into the building? And he has always said there was no plan. If we'd have gotten to the building, we have no idea what would have happened.
Yeah, because it was, like you said, it was so unprecedented. And it was a lot of fun, man. So, I mean, it's interesting because as an offshoot, I have to mention that because they beat up Dude Love, Cactus Jack as Dude Love and Terry Funk so hard, that led directly into Mick Foley's, 1 week retirement angle, blaming the fans for cheering for Austin when DX was beating up him and Funk. Yeah. And then Foley came back a week later as Dude Love to interrupt the Austin McMahon match. So even though DX wasn't involved per se in that storyline, the fact that they were getting cheered or they were making this brutal beatdown as heels, and Foley was getting, hearing the Austin chants, and they turned that shoot into a work to put over Dude Love as a heel. It's interesting how at the time it just seems that they were really listening to the audience. Hey, the audience is responding to this DX thing. And they're not responding to Dude Love as a baby face, and maybe they don't like Chainsaw Charlie as much. And so what they do is they turn around and they make Foley a heel because they were listening to the audience at that time. And it could be said that they're not listening to the audience at this time, 2018. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what a noble concept it is to actually listen to your audience. Who would have ever thought?
Well, and the thing is that pisses me off, man, is that they always say they do, but they never really do anymore. And it's frustrating to be a wrestling fan these days because here we are talking about these matches from 22 years ago, and they're all so vivid and clear in both of our separate memories. But if you told me what happened 2 months ago with Finn Balor and Bray Wyatt, and I'll be, I don't know. I guess they never finished that program because Bray Wyatt had meningitis, and then when he got back, they never finished the story. I mean, maybe they did, but I couldn't tell you what happened.
No. But the next week was the infamous Nation parody. Yeah, Triple H come out as the Croc. Yeah, Road Dogg come out as D'Lo Brown. Yeah, Billy Gunn come out as the Godfather. X-Pac was Mizark Henry. And then that comedian guy was the Nugget, Owen Hart, which that was great. Owen came out and Owen really took issue with this, from what I understand as a shoot.
Was that guy's name Jason Sensation?
Yeah, Jason Sensation. That's what his name was. Yeah.
The funny thing is, there was him, and there was another guy that did a Piper impersonation. At King of the Ring 94, there was like the little mini Piper guy, and that guy kind of worked the Massachusetts independent scene for years, with that same gimmick. And I remember seeing him live, and he was pretty cool. He was still doing his Piper thing, in like 2005 or whatever. So, it's interesting.
Yeah. So you had that parody. You had the Rock. You had the Nation versus DX. They ended up, trading battles back and forth, culminating at SummerSlam with Triple H and The Rock for the Intercontinental title in a ladder match, which is one of the best ladder matches you will see for a couple of guys who don't get off the ground very good. I will say that. But then a couple months later, the whole corporation thing gets going real good.
Right.
Rock joins the corporation. So, of course, what do we need to have DX do? We need a parody of the corporation now, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they do the parody of the corporation. Yeah, Triple H comes out as The Rock again. Road Dogg is Vince McMahon. Billy Gunn is Shane McMahon. X-Pac is a very, oh my God, a very bad impersonation of Ken Shamrock. Even worse impersonation of Shamrock than he was for Mark Henry in the previous parody skit. China did a Big Boss Man routine like she was a drum majorette.
Yeah, it's kind of like give you thoughts of S&M activities with China, which would be, depending on your point of view, either scary or exciting. Depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. And then you had a couple little people who portrayed the Stooges and stayed kissing Road Dogg, Mr. McMahon's ass for the entire time.
Right.
This was nowhere near as good as the Nation parody, though.
I was about to say the same thing. It when you're mentioning it, it doesn't even. I remember China with the nightstick and twirling it pretty good, and it's one of those things where when you go back to that same well, you know, like okay, DX is going to parody their Rock-led opponents. The first time it's great, it's unique, and then the second time when they parodies the corporation, it's not unique, so it's like, well, it's gotta, be better, and it either is gonna be or it's not, and it just wasn't as good. You know what I mean?
So that comes to, I believe it was Survivor Series. You had I'm sorry. One more time. It was Survivor Series. China turns on Triple H and DX and joins the corporation. So they have taken China away from Triple H and DX, or so we thought. But come to find out, it's all a big ruse, because the next week on Raw, Triple H and X-Pac are in a tag team, and they are against The Rock and Ken Shamrock. And Triple H turns on X-Pac and joins the corporate team. So now the corporate team is stacked, and DX is no more for this point in time. They kind of all split off, go their separate ways. X-Pac goes into a tag team with Kane, and they start that whole storyline with Tori. They ended up winning the tag team championship. Road Dogg went to the hardcore division, I do believe, and won the hardcore championship a couple of times. And Billy was just kind of stuck. They would throw the Outlaws back together for a tag team here and there, but he was just kind of the one left out to dry in this whole situation. And this went on until the October 25th, 1999 edition of Raw, where Triple H reforms DX when the New Age Outlaws are back together, and they are taking on Stone Cold and The Rock. And when Triple H comes down during the match, Austin cuts him off. They end up fighting going up to the ramp. In the middle of this, X-Pac comes through the crowd and gets a spinning heel kick in on The Rock. Road Dogg pins him 1, 2, 3 into the match. Triple H comes back, and they all start beating the crap out of both of them. X-Pac pulls out some of the new DX jerseys, the 69 jerseys. They throw them on, and all of a sudden, we have got the corporate DX and heels.
Right.
How do you think that this turned out?
Not very good. I mean, I think there's some
Now, granted, this is before Armageddon with Vince and Triple H going against each other, so we're not fully there yet. But how do you think that it started so far, though?
I would say not. I'd say that sometimes, sometimes WWE or WWF back then cuts things short before they have to, and that's always a dangerous game. It's always a thing where, it's the same thing with Goldberg's streak over in WCW, give or take a year, where you think that if a small amount of fans are kind of not into something anymore or rebelling against something, that, we got to switch gears. But I think sometimes, and they even said, Road Dogg said this in like a WWE official magazine back when like Raw magazine or something was actually readable and decent. And Road Dogg said that he did think that they cut off DX's baby faces too early, because if you really look at it, they were still super over. Some of the members, didn't really have what it took, say a Road Dogg to be a main event guy on his own. But if you still have that foursome or fivesome with China of DX as baby faces, the sums were worth more than the whole of their parts type of deal. And it just seemed like they kind of cut things short on DX's baby faces too quick. And sometimes people just don't want to boo the people that they actually do like. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah. I just think they cut it. I guess it's nothing that I said is too unique. It's just saying that sometimes you cut things off thinking you have to. Like we want to cut it short before it gets long in the tooth. But it didn't seem like the corporate DX, I guess that kind of led into Triple H's, being the heavyweight champion and everything. So it had a point to it. You're right about Billy Gunn. He's the guy. And I think he was bitter for years. If you look at some of these shoot interviews with Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, especially Billy Gunn, because he had the look, he had the athleticism. He kind of had a right to be angry about how Triple H got all the shine and Billy Gunn didn't get much of anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So after they reform, X-Pac, who is still at this time in a tag team with Kane, well, that didn't last long. The next week, he turns on Kane and takes Tori hostage. But come to find out, that's all a ruse between the two of them. So Tori is now a part of the new DX. So you have X-Pac, Tori, the New Age Outlaws, and then that brings us to Armageddon 99, which is one of the greatest storytelling matches that you will see. There wasn't a whole lot of wrestling going on in this match, but the last man standing match or the street fight or whatever it was between Triple H and Mr. McMahon with Stephanie in Vince's corner, kind of, fighting to free his daughter from the marriage that shouldn't have, quote unquote, happened while she was passed out in Vegas, and made Tess leave her at the altar because she was already married all of a sudden. This was supposed to free her from all of this if Vince would have won. But as we all know, it was a big sham, and Stephanie turns on Vince, hits him with a sledgehammer, and this is the beginning of the McMahon-Helmsley era.
And that was how many years ago? 19 years ago, man.
Yeah, 1999, and we're still in it.
God, can you believe it? Where have our lives gone? How much of our energy of watching, Triple H put himself over and Stephanie McMahon, wearing skirts or whatever the hell she does. But they are vastly entertaining people. Don't get me wrong, but being a wrestling fan does have a price, which we invest so much time into these guys. But seeing them kind of develop as a couple, let's face facts. The 90s just had a different sensibility. The late 90s, and I kind of say things. It's a glib comment on a a very serious thing, but pre 9/11 was just more fun, just to be a human being, or at least an American, because just some things that were just more powerful, like Triple H and that whole Vegas wedding. And now, I mean, if the implication was that this guy roofied this girl and got her to marry him, that you couldn't do that these days on a family-friendly PG show. But back then, it was just good television. It was just fun. And so anyway, I think that Vince McMahon actually stepped in for Test, because that pay-per-view match of McMahon versus Triple H, I think it was originally supposed to be a Test main event, but they just didn't think he was ready or would ever be ready to handle a main event. So the poll is in favor of the.
I don't know if it was so much that as it was that they had to get McMahon out of power so that he could gradually take himself away from TV a little bit, because he was starting up the XFL. That had a lot to do with it too, I do believe.
Right.
Because this was you were going into the final Super Bowl before the XFL was to begin. Like, he had to start getting his teams and stuff in order and things like that. So he took a little bit of time off. He was still on Monday nights a little bit, you know, because he came back. Whenever he came back, that's when they had they remade the Lex Express into the DX Express. They started SmackDown. He was starting the XFL. And then comes my favorite part of this run, which is the music video and the song King of Kings by Run DMC.
Oh, man, that's a killer track.
Yes, it is. And the music video went right along with the Attitude Era, what they were doing at the time. And God, I still listen to that song many times. As a matter of fact, when this podcast is over, I will probably put that song into this podcast at some point, because it is such a great song. Run DMC did awesome with it. And they were really set up to run things for a long time. But as we all know, Triple H has one very weak spot in his body, which is his quads.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say which was his ego.
Yeah, that could take a turn for the worse from time to time too.
Just real quick on Run DMC. They, before one of them passed away, I saw Run DMC in concert, and they acknowledged me because it was a college show. I went to the show wearing a gold jacket, like a sports coat that was gold colored, and it wasn't like obnoxious gold; it was just like yellow. But like the Run DMC guys were doing that whole put your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care type of thing. And I was kind of just aloof. I wasn't being disrespectful. I just didn't quite get what I was supposed to do. And so the guys, like, they said, "Hey, guy in the golden suit, put your hands in the air." Like, just don't care. So I had to comply with that.
Oh, man.
I've had a zealous existence when it comes to, like, wrestling and celebrities, man. I mean, I've had, like, really obscure stuff happen, but that if you can put that in for people, or if people can, you know, it's just one of those things you can find that song pretty quickly. And I actually have the CD that has the Run DMC DX mix. It's got some other good stuff, even the rock song. I think it's like Method Man or somebody does like a rock theme song. Which one was?
I know what CD you're talking about. It was one of them Attitude CDs, like Attitude Rap or something like that.
I want to say WWF Addiction. I want to say that. It was all the WWF themes with rap versions, and it's a really good CD. And the other thing, real quick, is that they did one like 7 years later, and Motorhead did a song for Evolution. and it's a really good song as well. I just had to mention that.
Yeah. The only bad song on that CD was Snoop trying to do Stone Cold's theme. That didn't work out.
Yeah.
But Ice-T and The Godfather, you remember that one? Pimpin' ain't easy, man.
I like it.
Yeah, that was sweet. That was sweet.
It's WWF Aggression is what it is.
That's what it is.
And the one with the other one I think is Forcible Entry that has that was from a few years later. So anyway, there's some plugs for you, WWF, WWE. Don't say we didn't try to help. You know?
Yeah, there you go. Give us our money, Vince.
Yeah, right.
You got $1 billion. We'll take 100 of it.
Totally.
But yeah, Triple H chose a squad, and that's kind of the end of the DX run for a few years. Then you go to SummerSlam 02, where Michaels comes back, and they have the last man, or they have the street fight, him and Triple H.
Oh yeah.
And he ends up going over Triple H, but Triple H bashes him with a hammer after, and everybody thinks he's crippled. But then he comes out, and he ends up in the Survivor Series match. And then you go to Triple H forming Evolution, Michaels joining NWO. That's pretty much your 03. Then 04, 05, 06, they kind of stay away from each other. But then you get to Backlash of 2006. Shawn Michaels and his tag team partner, God.
Oh, yeah.
Vince and Shane. And Shawn's looking pretty strong here in what is essentially a handicap match. And then the Spirit Squad comes down, which, for those of you that don't know, that was Dolph Ziggler's original character, was one of the Spirit Squad members, Mikey, I think. But they were tag team champions at this time. Ended up helping Vince and Shane go over on Michaels. And then the next night on Raw, they try it again. The Spirit Squad is beating down Michaels. But then here comes Triple H out to help his old buddy. And DX forms once again back to the original two, back to the blueprint of Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Well, they end up winning the tag titles not long after this. And then of course, in DX fashion, what do you think we have to have in this period of time?
A reunion or some type of the reunion was the two of them. They had a feud with Shane and Vince and Big Show that resulted in a Hell in a Cell. I remember that. That was a pretty good match. But what were you thinking of?
I was thinking they had to do a parody once again.
Oh, okay.
They did a parody of Vince and Shane.
Right. Vince loves Cox, that one.
Vince loves Cox. Yeah, they're drawing it all up on the board. Triple H comes down, and he is Vince. Then Shane's music hits, and here comes Shawn doing Shane's little dance at the top of the ramp, which is it's funny. And he does it quite well, actually. So that leads, of course, into the Saturday night's main event, where they take the championship from the Spirit Squad. The Vince loves Cox thing, the Big Show match. But this just kind of seemed like a little bit of nostalgia. They didn't really they were pushing Benoit. This is right before he did his little thing. They were pushing Rey Mysterio. Cena was coming up, JBL. So they needed some tag teams, so they threw Vince and Shane, or they threw DX back together for this. But it was short-lived.
Well,
And then,
you know what? Let me jump in. I actually enjoyed this second run of DX, and I'll tell you why if I could. I thought that it was just Hunter and Sean, but look, we've done. They even had a match. I think in 2004, a Hell in a Cell match, which was supposed to be Sean versus Hunter for the last time ever. Like that was how they booked it, like the last Battle of Atlanta Buzzsword Johnny Rich deal.
and if I remember correctly, is for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Right, I think you're right for Hunter's championship, and so for me, they had exhausted those two guys feuding with each other. They did Cyber Monday or whatever it was, Cyber Sunday or Taboo Tuesday. They had like a really good feud. They did the thing where Sean even got the belt at the Elimination Chamber. So this is all Sean versus Hunter stuff. So moving forward to the reunion, to me, I'll be honest with you, I enjoyed it. I mean, I think the fans had been booing Triple H for so many years, his reigns of terror and beating Booker T and feuding with Goldberg. And so Triple H was Triple H is a character or whatever you want to call it. He had really run his course as a bad guy. So to get to see like the popular, happy Triple H again after all that time was kind of cool, man. I kind of dug it, like around this time I wasn't watching pay-per-views so much, but I was watching Raw every week at least. And I kind of dug this era of D-Generation X 2.0 or, mid-2000s. I guess it was 2006, 2007. You're right. Unfortunately, the entire company really took a tragic turn with Benoit, but for what these guys are doing in DX, at least I liked it. You know what I mean? The thing with the Spirit Squad, and I remember when they reunited, I think it was on a Monday Night Raw, and like the Spirit Squad was beating up Sean, and I want to say that Triple H came out to make this save, or Triple H was already in the ring, or something was going on that they kind of did the reconciliation routine. And I remember there was a botch in it. Like somebody botched their timing or somebody botched a move or something like that. But JG, man, I remember that the fans were into it. The fans wanted to see DX come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm just glad it was short-lived. I enjoyed it, too. I wasn't really watching a whole lot at this time. This is when TNA started getting really hot.
Right.
I was more tuning into them. And the job that I had at the time, I was working every Monday night, so I really couldn't follow along the way that I wanted to. And TNA was still on Thursdays, and that just happened to be my off day, so I was getting to see that a lot more. But, yeah, going back and looking at a lot of it, it's, it was good for the first, few weeks, and then it got old for me again real quick. So, they had their little run here, and then they went their separate ways once again. But then you get back to 2009, and they strike up the band one more time to go into a feud with Legacy, which was Randy Orton, Ted DiBiase, and Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, our buddy. And our buddy Cody.
Cody.
Oh, my God. Cody's driving me nuts. I mean, just real quick, Cody, I had to tweet at Cody today because he said something about, a lot of fans don't know who Vince Russo is, and this is a non sequitur, but I basically said, hey, Cody, your dad, Dusty Rhodes, worked with Vince Russo in TNA, and here's the footage. Here's this footage from TNA's first year of Vince Russo and Dusty doing a segment with Nikita Koloff. So anyway, Legacy, I kind of liked. I mean, I think that at this time, bro, and I always put it like this, I think WWE got really super conservative after Benoit and after Linda McMahon wanted to run for office, and they just got super conservative with a lot of stuff. And, it was just too bad. But Randy Orton Cody, and DiBiase, they were another, contingency, another alliance, another group. But what the cool thing was is that they were all second generation guys, and they had a clear leader in Randy, and he had his two little followers. And 10 years later, as we know, one of them's made something of himself, and the other one's Ted DiBiase.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, Ted's doing good in his own line of work, but yeah, he's not in the business. He does a lot helping kids and stuff like that, though. So I applaud him for what he's doing. Have you seen that documentary? There's a documentary on YouTube you got to check out. Him and his dad running a camp for at-risk youth, and it's really good and really touching.
Well, I feel bad for what I said about him. but Ted DiBiase Jr., man, I guess for me as a wrestling fan, sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap. Well, if you're not on wrestling every week, then what the hell good are you? And so I apologize to Ted DiBiase Jr. before I get banned from the church or whatever. But I did like Legacy, is my point. And yeah, they had like some cage match or they got the tag belts, and they did a couple of those reunions. Like anytime they did like a Raw 15th anniversary or a Raw this anniversary, they would kind of like DX would be like one of the groups that they would trump out there as like, oh my God, we've got this surprise appearance from DX. And then it got to be like moving. But
we all know they work in the back as agents, so it's really not, you know what I mean?
Exactly. So like even moving, jumping ahead to 2018, when you had like kind of weird Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, Triple H, Shawn Michaels beating up those Revival guys and all that. After a while, it kind of runs its course, man. But I don't know. I like DX overall.
I do too. Their first time, actually, all five of them together was on the 1000th episode of Raw on June 23rd, 2012. And then they end up squashing one of the greatest things about Raw at that time, Damian Sandow. So that between that and him not cashing in on Cena, that just ruined his career right there. Those two incidents, which happened within a month of each other, pretty much.
Well, I'll say this, man. I mean, just thinking about as a real obscure little thing, just to go back to what I said a couple hours ago, which was, isn't it funny how a guy like Justin Credible, who was really on the cusp of this, DX thing, and I mean, yeah, Sean Waltman probably is slightly more talented in some ways than Justin Credible, but Justin Credible had a really great ECW run. And isn't it interesting with just a few choices or a few contracts or whatever it might be that, X-Pac was kind of the fifth guy who ran with these other guys instead of, say, a PJ Walker or a Justin Credible. And I'm not trying to create another Mandela effect, conspiracy theory here, but it just goes to show as a life lesson to anyone out there listening, sometimes if you're in with the right pack of guys, stick with that right pack of guys, see what happens. And not to say that Justin left them or whatever, but I guess it just turned out there. I'm thinking about Justin Credible because I know that he's been doing this documentary, but I think I'm not really sure how he's doing right now, to be honest with you. So
he's not doing well at all, I can tell you.
That's not good.
It's really sad.
I'm going to look him up, man, and because I talked to Justin just a couple of months ago when he was doing pretty well, and it's tough to see that because, man, I'll tell you, I'm sure we both got tons of wrestling stories. I was there the night that Scott Hall had his little breakdown thing in Fall River, Mass. That got on ESPN. Like, I was there for that, and so it's you see these guys, bro, that are bigger than life, they're larger than life. And they do have these demons, and you can blame the road, you can blame, just the nature of the beast, or blame the guy themselves. But it's just kind of sad when these guys have these issues, man.
Yeah, Justin. a couple days ago, actually, just found out that his wife has only got a few months to live.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, that's kind of hitting him right now. I follow him along pretty good on Twitter. So yeah, you can check all that out on his Twitter page. He, is posting updates and things like that. But yeah, she's stage 4 apparently, and there's not much hope for her. So everybody out there, just kind of keep PJ Polanco, which is his real name, just kind of keep him and his wife and all their family in your prayers, and hope for the best for him. Hope that it doesn't drag Justin even further into the abyss than what he already is.
Yeah, that's sad, man. I mean, I didn't mean to turn it on such a note, but it's such a dichotomy, JG, of what these guys go through. They go through real life stuff just like everybody else, and then you have that escapism that we all enjoy from watching television and going to the arenas and seeing these guys. And it's tough sometimes to wrap our head around it, and even Shawn Michaels, Shawn Michaels is part of DX and having to miss 4 years of his career because of a back injury, and then his journey with finding God, and even now some people take issue with Shawn for stuff he did in the mid 90s or the early 90s. So it's interesting,
Yeah. But you had WrestleMania 31, the NWO versus DX, which was supposed to be Triple H versus Sting, but it ended up being a Monday Night Wars brought to life type thing. And it was all right to see. It was a nice little throwback to the 90s to see that.
I popped for it. I'll be honest. I dug it. I just thought it was a thing where, the only thing I didn't like about that was really that Triple H, I don't care that Triple H won the match so much. It's just that an hour later, he's getting hip tossed by Ronda Rousey. And this was back when Ronda was full-time UFC. And it's like, wait a minute, didn't Triple H just go through this battle of generations with Sting? And was Sting just a guy to soften up Triple H for Ronda? Like, is that what's going on? So,
and then in crazy booking, they turned around in a couple months and put Sting in a title match with Seth Rollins.
Right. He beat the Big Show on Raw. So Sting, you can say that Sting is undefeated at Raw. He beat Ric Flair sort of on that final Nitro, which is sort of Raw. And then 18 years later or 14 years, whatever it was, he's beating the Big Show, I think even by a submission. But yeah, man, as far as DX, I'm trying to think, did we miss any members? I mean, you got to mention Rude. You got to mention China. You're right. They did kind of do this romance where not Tori Wilson, but the other Tori, Terry Power Tori.
Terry Power, yeah.
Right. Where she was who was she supposed to be with? X-Pac?
Yeah, she was originally with Kane.
Right.
And then when Kane and X-Pac had their little tag team run, she was kind of with both of them. But whenever DX reformed, X-Pac abducted her and supposedly was holding her and treating her as a sexual slave and all that stuff, which caused Kane to come after her, or to come after him to get to her, but it was all a ruse the whole time. And ended up she turned on Kane and went with DX. And then there was one other member that I did forget to mention, was in this 2009 run, Hornswoggle actually became a member of DX for a very short period of time.
Well, I totally forgot that. No offense to Hornswoggle, but I don't remember him being in DX, but I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just don't remember it.
Yeah, it was very short. It was like maybe for a couple of weeks, just he would come out with them. That's all. And then So, we had the WrestleMania thing, and then they reunited at Raw 25, kind of under the DX umbrella, but you also had the Click in there too. So, and that was pretty much all to put over the Balor Club.
Right.
And the Barrier Revival more, which you talked about. So, with everything in history here with DX, we've talked about the two major factions of the 90s, of the Monday Night Wars, NWO versus DX. How do you think they stack up against each other?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I would have to say this. NWO came first. NWO, by all accounts, as the Hogan, Nash, Hall, trilogy or trinity or whatever, that was June of 1996. DX, you can make a case for August 97 or October 97 when they started using the name DX and they started teaming. Therefore, although that's only a year and change, you have to, I would say by any quantum physics equation, you've got to give the nod to NWO as being more influential, if nothing else because they came first. And they had already done, as we established, NWO sold out pay-per-view January of 97. They already had big box office numbers. They were already doing so much stuff. NWO gave Hulk Hogan a second act to his career of probably 5 acts total, but he had this whole WCW reboot as a villain. So that, if nothing else, and you got Dennis Rodman, you got Karl Malone, Jay Leno is wrestling. I mean, and so it's one of those things where if this was an official WWE broadcast of some kind, they would totally say that, NWO, kind of led the way for DX, but DX took the ball and ran with it. They would spin it to put DX over, but true to my own legacy, my own perception, man, I got to say that as far as influence and as far as really changing the business, it's NWO. I mean, they were the ones that started this thing, as the modern day heel clique that got super over. So they started. Nothing against DX, but I got to put NWO over on this one.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because while I do agree with NWO being the first, I think DX was booked better in the way that it wasn't a continuous storyline and they didn't continue adding members and continue adding members and continue adding members. They would cool off for a while. They would break them up and bring them back together. You can't miss something if it's not gone. The only time they really did that with the NWO is when they brought back the NWO 2000, which didn't really have any of the original NWO characters in it to begin with.
Right.
So, and then once again, of course, whenever they got to WWE, which made NWO pretty cool again for a very short period of time until we found out none of them could work anymore.
For half a cup of coffee before everyone got injured.
Yeah. So I really have to call it, as being a virtual tie between the two, because I don't think that you can put one without the other. You're not going to have DX without the NWO, but you're not going to have the NWO influence and run for as long as they did without DX.
Yeah, sure. And I can totally see that. And it's one of those things, man, where you could flip a coin or you could take either side of the argument and you wouldn't be wrong, because it's like who's a better actress, Nicole Kidman or Sandra Bullock, and you could have a debate, who's a better actress, Betty Davis or Katharine Hepburn. I mean, there's not a wrong answer in that type of thing. You know what I mean?
And I had both of their shirts, multiples of them. I had the Hollywood do-rag. I had the DX, wristbands. I was all about both of them.
Well, one of the great regrets, and it's so crazy that I'm even going to mention this, a great regret from my life as a wrestling fan, I once was in a store, and there was a DX box set of action figures with I think it was all 5. I think it was Billy Gunn, China, Road Dogg, or maybe it was just the 4 guys, but it was a DX 98 action figure set, and I wish I had bought that damn thing at the time, but I didn't, buddy. So I mean, if for people of a certain generation, talk about DX, it's just a lot of fun, and you can hear things like, I mean, look, I listen to my fair share of podcasts. You hear a guy like Jim Cornette talk about what a pain in the ass Shawn Michaels was, and I totally buy that. But in a real way, man, DX was such a huge thing, and the suck it chance, and we get 2 words for you, and the fact that Road Dogg, broke the Armstrong curse. I mean, the Road Dogg, Jesse James, and I guess we didn't talk about too much about the New Age Outlaws, but just to put them over for a minute, I mean, they had a huge contribution. I mean, when Road Dogg, Jesse James worked the mic in those 98 days, the 1998 year, he was huge, man. I mean, like people really dug when the Road Dogg would say, for those, D-Generation X proudly presents to you, that was fucking over. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I had a Road Dogg beanie, man. One of them. It was a big one too. I love that thing. I was all about the Road Dogg back then. Yeah, Road Dogg, Jesse James, the badass Billy Gunn, the New Age Outlaws.
Oh my God! It's 20,000 people in the palm of his hand and having a great time, and I think that's one thing, which, not to harp on the old wrestling fan being crotchety and angry, but what wrestling fans today don't quite get is there was a time when it was cool to like who the promotion liked. Like maybe Vince McMahon himself was just a cooler guy 20 or 30 years ago, but you're putting Roman Reigns out there, and it's like, if he bleeds, if he doesn't bleed, nobody gives a damn about the guy. But back 20 years ago, you get more positive action for Road Dogg, who was not a top guy, except that he was in this really cool contingent, the DX thing. So it's just a deal where, once again, why do older wrestling fans hate younger wrestling fans? It's not that I hate them, it's that I pity them, because they don't have good wrestling to watch for the most part.
So that's going to wrap up our segment here with the DX or Factions series. We'll be rolling this again next week with we're going to have a choice between the 4 Horsemen, the BWO from ECW, or the Hart Foundation. I'm actually going to probably put this up on Twitter later on this week, and we're going to figure out what the fans want us to discuss. So it's going to be the Hart Foundation, the 4 Horsemen, or the BWO. And don't knock what they did in ECW too much, guys, because they had a very, very rabid following in ECW, so much that Vince brought them in for a few WWE shows. They were in there for Raw a few times.
They were cool, man. And look, I can tell you a 1-minute BWO story if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was 1997, and I was going to this, ECW show, I think in Webster, Mass. And these buildings were so old, man, like these old school buildings that they still have wrestling shows in today, and these 400-seat arenas and beautiful buildings for wrestling, And I happened to be hanging out in the hallway of the place, and I happened to be wearing all blue. I had like a blue button-down shirt. It was probably like the winter in New England is so damn long. So it could have been any time from like January to March. I want to say somewhere in February. And, there they were, meaning Stevie Richards, Blue Meanie, and I want to say that there was a third guy with them, but I can't remember who. I don't think who was it?
I forget who it was, but it was his. He portrayed Hollywood.
Yeah, they had Nova, Supernova.
Yeah,
and it might have been. They also had a guy up in New England, at least, called the Inchworm, who was I think they just used him for local spot shows, but I think he showed up at Barely Legal. He was their Dennis Rodman wannabe guy, and he was really not very tall, so it didn't really kind of work. But he was African American, and he didn't really do anything but just stand there. But I remember being in the hallway, and I was wearing all blue, and I was talking to Stevie Richards, who was a really cool guy, and Blue Meanie came over, and I actually had, as a young guy, I had an ECW press pass, and I had it like around the collar, like the whole, the lanyard gimmick, the old lanyard gimmick. So I'm wearing this lanyard of ECW press pass, and Blue Meanie's like touching my neck and like touching my lanyard, like he was intrigued by my press pass. And meanwhile, I'm talking to Stevie, and I'm like, and then they were in the hallway waiting for their their BWO music to hit because they were going to come through the crowd. And then when their music hit, it just occurred to me, man, I'm wearing all blue. Like, I'm going to like jump in front of these guys and kind of like walk them to the ring as close as I can get without actually like going to the ring with them. So I just did, and I'm a big enough guy that, at least for my friends, they're like, man, did you just come out with the BWO? And I was like, yeah, of course I did. They invited me to, but they didn't invite me to. I just did it.
Sweet.
It was good for a laugh, man. It was just one of those funny things where, like, they didn't really care, I'm sure. You know what I mean? Because I didn't go to the ring. I wasn't that much of a jerk. I just kind of, like, their music hit. I'm free to walk. I'm allowed to walk where I want, and they were coming through the crowd, so I just kind of position-balled myself just for the benefit of those with still photography and my 5 or 6 friends that happen to see this ridiculousness, to kind of make it look like I walked the BWO to the ring for a night, but I really didn't.
Yeah, so that's a great BWO story, man. I love it. Do you want to go ahead and – how's your movie doing?
Well, thanks for asking, JG. Appreciate it. The Manor's doing quite well. It's a thing where it's on Amazon. It's available at Walmart on discs, and it's on video on demand. And it's the movie that I have scenes with Kevin Nash, and I have scenes with Christina Robinson from Dexter, and Sully Erna, the singer of Godsmack, plays my brother in this movie. And so it's a cool movie. We had a screening last week in Rhode Island in East Greenwich. A couple hundred people came out for like a friends and family type of night, and people dug it, man. So if people want to look on MikeMessier.com and just go into my blog anywhere and just put The Manor Lionsgate, it's pretty cool, man. It's being released by Lionsgate, and it's just one of those deals, man. It's probably what I would call it as a midnight movie. Watch the movie at midnight and have your favorite beverage, your favorite popcorn or candy with you. And I think it would be a good movie that would play well at like a midnight screening or a Halloween screening, that type of thing.
Nice, man. That's awesome. Anything else you want to put over while we're on here?
Well, hey, man, I just did a podcast with our buddy Cole. Cole Sports Guys got the whole "What Have They Done to Our Sport" going. So people, if you like me and JG, man, check out Cole, what he's up to. You guys need to talk some night, too. He's out in Omaha, I think.
Yeah, I plan on trying to get him on here sometime soon.
Yeah, we had an interesting talk tonight.
Good, man. I'm glad y'all are doing well with that. I appreciate you coming on here with. I appreciate you coming on here with me, even after doing that. And We're going to have to bring the Hambone on with the three of us too, and talk about something a little personal. We'll do that once some more information comes out.
Well, that sounds good, man. I'm down for that. And look, man, I know what you're talking about, and it's serious stuff. We're all trying to just enjoy our lives, and so I think what people need to do is look, things online, and this is just a thing in general. I'm just going to say this in general. Things online can get heated between people, and bro, I get into these Twitter wars and I get into these Facebook conflicts with people. But at the end of the day, sometimes you got to take a step back and say, is it worth it to push this issue with somebody? And some people, even in today's day and age, don't realize when to fucking back off. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's all I'll say right now. But people got to be respectful, and bro, and I'll just, because I like sometimes, rather than condemn others, I'll just put myself in the mix. I get kind of heated with some stuff in wrestling Facebook groups or Twitter groups. I get upset or emotional if people aren't respecting my opinion. But somewhere along the line in the last couple of years, I just realized, man, people are just trying to enjoy their fucking lives, and debate is one thing, and asking questions is one thing, and disagreeing and maybe friendly ribs or sideways comments or sarcasm. But if you get to the point with anybody where you're just arguing to the point of infinity and getting emotionally upset, and this shit fucking interferes with your life, that's when you got to take a step back, turn that fucking laptop off for a couple of days, turn that phone off if you have to, and just take a fucking breath. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some people take this shit way too seriously.
And it's tough, man.
But yeah, I'm thinking that we're probably going to need to dive into that here pretty soon, so we'll definitely get that going. Make sure y'all follow me at JG Has Heat on Twitter. The more follows I get, the closer I get to my goal of having a shop on ProWrestlingTees.com. So make sure you guys follow me, add me on Facebook, Jeremy Grubb or Oak Grubb. Jeremy Grubb is about 5,000 deep, so you might have to start using Oak Grubb, OKE. But I'm at both of those. Generating Heat YouTube channel is where you find our archives with pictures. Eventually, we'll get some video up there as soon as I feel like I'm good looking enough to actually do video. But yes, so make sure you're doing that. If you're listening to us on the Anchor app, make sure you favorite the Generating Heat podcast on Anchor, and that will give you the option to leave us messages, voice messages, questions, concerns, anything like that. If you have some questions you'd like to type out to us at generatingheat@gmail.com. For Mikey Messier, I'm JG. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you next week. Look for the poll to go up on Twitter in the next couple of days. It's going to be the Hart Foundation, the BWO, or the Four Horsemen. Thank you all for listening. Have a great night.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.